This Week in Palestine offers news, information, analysis, and culture from people who are committed to the liberation of Palestine. The following hour may contain views that do not necessarily reflect those of WZBC, Boston College, or its Board of Trustees. Good morning, if you're listening to WZBC Radio. And for all of our podcast listeners, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Sophia Rose Woolman. Today is November 30th, 2025, and you are listening to This Week in Palestine. Today, we bring you recordings from the 55th Annual Day of Mourning in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The website of the United American Indians of New England explains that since 1970, Indigenous peoples and their allies have gathered at noon on Coles Hill in Plymouth to commemorate a national day of mourning on the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. Many people do not celebrate the arrival of the Pilgrims and other European settlers. Thanksgiving Day is a reminder of the genocide of millions of Native people, the theft of Native lands, and the erasure of Native cultures. Each year, participants in the National Day of Mourning honor Indigenous ancestors and Native resilience. And this year, thousands of people gathered in Plymouth for the Day of Mourning to share a day of remembrance and spiritual connection, as well as a protest against the racism and oppression that Indigenous people continue to experience worldwide. The National Day of Mourning is a time and place for creating true awareness of Indigenous peoples and history, for shattering the untrue image of the Pilgrims and the unjust system based on white supremacy, settler colonialism, sexism, homophobia, and the profit-driven destruction of the earth that they and other European settlers introduced to these shores.
We'll start today with words from Chairwoman Melissa Harding Ferretti, Chairwoman of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. I give thanks to this sacred place here at Patuxet, what is known today as Plymouth, at the heart of what we call the Wampanoag Nation, and what is the traditional homelands of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. We have called this land home for thousands of years. Our ancestors are buried here, and our descendants can still be found here today. We wholeheartedly recognize that we are not alone here in Massachusetts, that there are many other tribal communities and direct descendants throughout the Commonwealth. The history of Plymouth and the Massachusetts colony is complex and painful. What happened here on these lands impacted all Native nations across New England and eventually spread far and wide throughout this country and into the Canadian Maritimes. The spread of colonization, we know, resulted in armed conflict, murder, enslavement, rape, and dispossession of our lands, and it was a direct assault on all Native cultures and lifeways. There will always be critics and those that seek to silence us, divide us, and separate us. But I and we are here today to show the world that we are not a conquered people. We are proud, resilient, and powerful people, well aware of our history here. We are still here today and stand here today in peace and solidarity. Katapatanamu, Chairwoman Harding Ferretti. I'm Jean-Luc Purit. I am from the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana, and here I serve as the president of the board of directors for the North American Indian Center of Boston, Massachusetts' oldest urban Indian center. I'm going to call upon Keisha James, an enrolled member of the Aquinnah Wampanoag tribe, co-leader of United American Indians New England, a member of the NACOB Board of Directors, and a Harvard Law student.
Good afternoon, sisters, brothers, and siblings. Once again, on so-called Thanksgiving Day, United American Indians of New England and our supporters are gathered on this hill to observe a national day of mourning for the indigenous people murdered by settler colonialism and imperialism worldwide. Today marks the 56th time we have gathered here to mourn our ancestors, tear down settler mythologies, and speak truth to power. National Day of Mourning came into existence in 1970 when my grandfather, an Aquinnah Wampanoag man named Wamsutta Frank James, was invited by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to speak at a banquet celebrating the 350th anniversary of the arrival of the Pilgrims. The organizers of the banquet no doubt imagined that Wamsutta would sing the praises of the American settler colonial project and thank the Pilgrims for bringing civilization to these shores. However, the speech that Wamsutta wrote, which was based on historical fact rather than the sham version of history perpetuated in the Thanksgiving myth, was a far cry from complimentary. In his speech, Wamsutta not only named atrocities committed by the Pilgrims, but also reflected upon the fate of the Wampanoag at the hands of the settler invaders. Wamsutta's speech contained a powerful message of Native American pride. "Our spirit refuses to die," wrote Wamsutta. "Yesterday we walked the woodland paths and sandy trails. Today we must walk the macadam highways and roads. We are uniting. We stand tall and proud, and before too many moons passed, we will right the wrongs that we have allowed to happen to us." When state officials saw an advance copy of Wamsutta's speech, they refused to allow him to deliver it, saying that the speech was too inflammatory. They told him he could speak only if he were willing to offer false praise of the Pilgrims. The organizers even offered to write a speech for him, one which would better fit with their settler narrative. But Wamsutta refused to have words put into his mouth. His suppressed speech was printed in newspapers across the country, and he and other local Native activists began to plan a protest. The flyer for this protest, which was circulated nationwide, read, "What do we have to be thankful for? The United American Indians of New England have declared Thanksgiving Day to be a national day of mourning for Native Americans." On so-called Thanksgiving Day, 1970, Wamsutta and members of at least 25 tribes, as well as a handful of non-Native allies, gathered here on this hill and observed the first National Day of Mourning. Attendees spoke out about the Pilgrim invasion and conditions in Indian country, marched around Plymouth, boarded the Mayflower II, and even buried Plymouth Rock in sand. One leader of the American Indian movement would later say of the first National Day of Mourning that it is a day American Indians won't forget. "We went to Plymouth for a purpose, to mourn since the landing of the Pilgrims the repression of the American Indian, and to indict the hypocrisy of a system that glorifies that oppression." So, why do so many Native people object to the Thanksgiving myth? According to this myth, the Pilgrims, seeking religious freedom, landed on Plymouth Rock. The Indians welcomed them with open arms and then conveniently faded into the background. The end. Here is the truth. First, the Pilgrims are glorified and mythologized because the circumstances of the first permanent English colony in North America, Jamestown, were far too ugly to hold up as an effective national myth. Pilgrims and Indians are a much more marketable story than settler cannibalism. Second, the Pilgrims came here as part of a commercial venture. They didn't need religious freedom. They already had that back in the Netherlands. The Mayflower Compact was merely a group of white men who wanted to ensure that they would get a return on their investment. Third, when the Pilgrims arrived on outer Cape Cod, by the way, not on the fictitious Plymouth Rock down the hill, one of the first things they did was rob Wampanoag graves at Corn Hill and steal as much of their winter provisions of corn and beans as they were able to carry. Fourth, Some Wampanoag ancestors did greet the Pilgrims and save them from starvation. And what did we, the Indigenous people of this continent, get in return for this kindness? Genocide, the theft of our lands, destruction of our traditional ways of life, slavery, starvation, and never-ending oppression. Fifth, the first official Thanksgiving did not take place in 1621 when the Pilgrims had a harvest time meal provided largely by the Wampanoag. Instead, the first Thanksgiving was declared in 1637 by Governor Winthrop of the Massachusetts Bay Colony to celebrate the massacre of over 700 Pequot men, women, and children on the banks of the Mystic River in Connecticut. Subsequent slaughters of Indigenous people would be celebrated by a day of Thanksgiving, and yet we are labeled savages in the history books. So, why does any of this matter? After all, 1620 was a long time ago, and the Pilgrim forefathers had been rotting in their graves for centuries. It is simple. The past influences the present. In her book, Lose Your Mother, A Journey Along the Atlantic Slave Route, Sadia V. Hartman wrote, "I too live in the time of slavery, by which I mean I am living in the future created by it. So too are we living in the time of the Pilgrims." Because the settler project created by the Pilgrims did not end with the Pilgrims. The evils that the Pilgrims brought to these shores, racism, slavery, the class system, jails, homophobia, transphobia, patriarchy, these evils continue to affect the peoples of Turtle Island and beyond. The United States was born here, and its myriad crimes therefore rest on the shoulders of the Pilgrim forefathers. And indeed, all settler colonial projects worldwide, past and present, are indebted to the Pilgrims. These settler colonial projects have terrorized Indigenous peoples for centuries. From the colonial period to the 21st century, this has entailed torture, massacres, family separations, systematic military occupations, and the forced removals of Indigenous peoples from their ancestral homelands. Let us not forget that this country was founded on the ideology of white supremacy, the widespread practice of African slavery, and a policy of genocide and land theft. Let us not forget that under the pipelines, skyscrapers, mines, and oil rigs lie the interred bones, sacred objects, and villages of our native ancestors. Let us not forget that this is a country that continues to glorify murderers such as Christopher Columbus, that worships slave-owning presidents such as Washington and Jefferson, and even carves their faces into the Black Hills of the Lakota. And until this settler colonial project and all settler colonial projects are dismantled, we will continue to live in the time of the Pilgrims. So, the Pilgrims are not ancient history, and we cannot allow their crimes to be sanitized and forgotten. And that is why, year after year, we have gathered on this hill to tear down the Thanksgiving mythology. It is simple. When people perpetuate the Thanksgiving mythology, they are not only erasing the Pilgrims' legacy of settler colonialism and genocide, but also celebrating it. But Native people did not simply fade into the background, as the Thanksgiving myth says. We have survived and flourished. We have persevered. The very fact that you are here is proof that we did not vanish. Our very presence frees this land from the lies of the history books and the myth makers. We will remember and honor all our ancestors in the struggle who went before us. We will speak truth to power, as we have been doing since the first National Day of Mourning in 1970. The first National Day of Mourning in 1970 was a powerful demonstration of Native unity, and it has continued for all these years as a powerful demonstration of the unity of all people who speak truth to power. Many of the conditions that prevailed in Indian country in 1970 still prevail today. In 1970, our average life expectancy was just 44 years. Today, we continue to have the lowest life expectancy of any group in the U.S., and the death rate for Native women has increased 20% over the past 15 years. In 1970, our suicide and infant mortality rates were the highest in the country. This has not changed. All of us are struggling under the oppression of a capitalist system which forces people to make a bitter choice between heating and eating. And we will continue to gather on this hill until we are free from this oppressive system, until corporations and the U.S. military stop polluting the earth. until we dismantle the brutal apparatus of mass incarceration. We will not stop until the oppression of our LGBTQ and two-spirit siblings is a thing of the past, until unhoused people have homes, until there are no more murdered and missing Indigenous women and other relatives, until human beings are no longer deported or locked in cages at the U.S. border, despite the fact that no one is illegal on stolen land. Until no person goes hungry or is left to die because they have little or no access to quality health care. Until insulin is free. Until union busting is a thing of the past. We will not stop until the U.S. ends its colonial occupations of Puerto Rico and the sovereign kingdom of Hawaii. Until the U.S. stops its warmongering worldwide, until the U.S. ends its interventions in Haiti and repays the billions it stole from the Haitian people. Until the U.S. pays reparations to Black Americans. Until land back for Native nations. Until then, the struggle will continue. In the spirit of Crazy Horse, in the spirit of Metacom, in the spirit of Geronimo, above all, to all people who fight and struggle for real justice. We are not vanishing. We are not conquered. We are as strong as ever.
You're listening to This Week in Palestine on WZBC Radio. This week, we're hearing from the 2025 Day of Mourning, which took place this past Thursday. The Day of Mourning has been hosted each year in Plymouth, Massachusetts since 1970. All of the speakers we'll be hearing from are Indigenous. Many of them speak to the extreme violence that Palestinians and Palestine have been experiencing, and to the resistance of Palestinians on their land and in the diaspora. And other speakers have different focuses, but illuminate elements about the systems of violence and greed, exploitation and domination that are absolutely relevant and inseparable from the Zionism that's so bolstered by the United States. Let's turn to the Day of Mourning.
We're going to have words from the ground level from Matoi Monroe, co-leader of United American Indians of New England.
I want to describe myself. I am Oglala Lakota. I am a two-spirit person, but perceived as a woman. I am somebody who has lost most of my hair because of chemotherapy. So now I have really short hair, but it's nice. And it's black and it's gray, and I'm all good with that because I'm not a kid. It's all good. And I'm thick, and I'm proud of that. And I wear glasses. That's about it. You know, I'm sure there are so many things on people's minds right now. Everyone I know feels as though their head is spinning with so much happening so fast in our communities, nationally, and in the world. In Indian country, of course, budget cuts and program cuts always have a huge impact on us. This year's cuts to food programs, housing, heat assistance, education, and healthcare have felt overwhelming sometimes. But tribal nations are doing their best to demand that treaties will be honored and that tribal citizens get the benefits that they are owed. Museums and other institutions are still taking much too long to return our ancestors and sacred items. Why have we had to wait for decades to bring our ancestors home? Our children continue to be disproportionately in foster care in both the U.S. and Canada. Trans and two-spirit people are subject to even more hate and violence than usual right now, fearing for their lives and fearing that they will not be able to obtain proper care. For disabled people, things are even worse, and there's a very high percentage of Native disabled people. If you're from our communities, you know that, but you may have heard that information about missing and murdered Indigenous women has been removed from the government's website because it is considered diversity, equity, and inclusion, and therefore banned. You may have heard that this country has a vice president who stands up in front of thousands of people and says that when Columbus first got here and the other Europeans first got here, they were shocked because the sacrifice of children was so widespread, and that's why they had to bring Christianity to us. We're talking about people who are killing children every day in Palestine, around the world, and they dare to say that about us. You may have heard how certain museums and national parks have been taking down signs with information about Indigenous history and Black history. They're trying to erase our history yet again. We fought for years to get those kind of signs up that had truthful information instead of the garbage that had been there before. But they cannot seal our history by taking it down. We will remember who we are and where we came from, and we will be sure our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren know too. I don't need to tell you that there's an upsurge in white supremacy. Government agencies such as Homeland Security pander to the idea of a white supremacist homeland, even in their social media. They're bold about it. Islamophobia and racism are heightened. And the courts gave a green light for Black and brown people to be scooped up for no reason at all by masked and armed ICE agents. Some of the worst attacks right now on Black and brown communities, including Native American people, have come from ICE. We've seen families violently separated, entire apartment buildings attacked, raids at Home Depot and the car wash in Alston, and outside schools, unaccompanied kids sleeping in foil blankets and cages, thousands of people kidnapped off the streets and disappeared or deported, families hiding at home and keeping their children out of school because they fear ICE raids so much. We see the opening of abusive detention centers, such as the so-called alligator at Alcatraz on tribal lands in the Everglades. And other concentration camps are being set up to hold thousands of migrants in inhuman conditions. If you read what people say when they get out, or even when they're there talking to their families, it's horrifying. And when I think of them, I certainly think of all the prisoners who are locked up today, too. And I hope that some of them will be able to hear what we're saying. I believe that we, as Indigenous people, have a duty to ignore colonial borders. Those are not our borders. One reason, but not the only reason, is that many of the people being directly impacted are our Indigenous relatives who come from Mexico, Guatemala, and many other countries. Who are the Pilgrims and their descendants to decide who should live or study here and who should not? And I know that some people think that we should stay in our lane here and only talk about what they think are strictly Indigenous issues. But we know from our elders that ending the Vietnam War was also an important Indigenous issue in the earlier days of national mourning. Year after year, we have stood here and condemned imperialist wars from Iraq to Venezuela now, as they're being so threatened by the U.S. We have called out the complicity of the U.S. government in the brutal genocide of our Indigenous Palestinian relations in Gaza and the West Bank. Long live Palestine. And we continue that history today as we join with millions around the country in saying, no boots on the ground, no bombs in the air, U.S. out of everywhere. I want to talk just a little bit about the U.S. 250th anniversary nonsense next year. So while it's important to include the history of Indigenous peoples' involvement in the so-called Revolutionary War, we also know how devastating it was for us. It led to tribes being split, even families being split. it led to the theft of millions more acres of our lands. Native peoples are being portrayed right now in documentaries and other settler media as contributors to the American project, but not as people from Native nations that predate their United States and that still hold authority over their lands and citizens. Once again, we are being erased as the settlers turn the first people of this land into their own symbols of American virtue. So I want to remind everybody that those famous freedoms that were promised in 1776 were never intended to apply to us. We are the so-called merciless Indian savages mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. So I, for one, don't feel a need to celebrate the 250th next year. The most important thing that we probably all will speak about today is that we must stop and listen to the earth. COP30 had thousands of Indigenous people attending, but very few countries listening. As you may have seen in the media, a lot of Indigenous people fought their way, like we're fighting, fist fighting, and trying to get in there and things like that. It was amazing to see them in action. Love seeing our warriors in action. And we continue, these big corporations in these countries that are controlled by big corporations have no hesitation about destroying land, bodies of water, or even millions of people in countries such as Congo. The so-called green transition that so many Democrats talk about is actually resulting in even more native lands being seized for lithium and other natural minerals. That just happened within this past year at Thatcher Pass. Every action of the billionaires and their henchmen is an attempt to smash us into compliance. Now more than ever, we must resist. And for us, resistance is not a choice. Resistance and taking care of each other is what our ancestors taught us to do. Resistance is our survival, and that resistance cannot exist without solidarity. We must look beyond our own lives and struggles to see and name the systems at play. We must be fierce against depression and also take care of each other. We honor the truth here at National Day of Mourning, and the truth is that the cruelty we are seeing in Palestine, Chicago, Florida, California, Massachusetts, Washington, and many other places is absolutely intentional. The cruelty is the point. I want to turn now to something that has made our hearts soar. We have had a huge victory this past year. As many of you know, our brother, Leonard Peltier, served nearly 50 years, imagine 50 years, in federal prison following a frame-up on charges that he shot 2 FBI agents on Pine Ridge in 1975. His trial was full of misconduct, including the fact that the prosecutors withheld evidence proving that Leonard's gun was not involved in the shooting. We worked for his freedom for all of those years. We never forgot about him. In January of this year, right before leaving office, Biden finally signed an order that released Leonard to his home community at Turtle Mountain Reservation. Leonard is not allowed to travel freely, which is why he can't be here with us today. Everybody who supported Leonard did something, played a part in helping him to get free. And when we see that, we have to remember that we will get our political prisoners released. And that includes Palestine and many other countries too. So today, instead of hearing somebody else reading a message from Leonard to National Day of Mourning, as usually happens, you are about to hear Leonard's own voice.
Hello and greetings to my sisters and brothers on the Day of Mourning. I can happily say, because of your hard work and support over the years, that I'm now sitting in my own personal home, pretty nice little home that was bought for me by Indian people, not tribes. And it's completely furnished. I got a lot of gifts from Native people to hang on the walls, and some of my paintings, of course. I'm comfortable compared to the the cell I was in for the 49 years, 0.2 months. And I'm happy to hear that you're still exposing Thanksgiving. It was probably one of the biggest false propaganda information that the American people and American government has ever distributed among people around the world. They claim it's a day of Thanksgiving and how great of a friend they were to Native people and celebrated with them turkey and other foods. When if you look deeply into the real actual history, they massacred a number of people on the day of mourning, and I know that's why you created the day of mourning. And I'm happy that you're still continuing to do it, and to expose it and have a memorial on it. I hope next year, after I get off of these harsh restrictions, that I can travel around a little bit to the various different Native nations to tell you personally, thank you. Thank you very much, and I love you for everything and the years you put behind trying to win my freedom. If I will be there next year. I promise you. I will show up somehow, even if I have to hitchhike, which I don't think I will, but I will be there and celebrate with you, or mourn with you, is what I should really say. Maybe speak to you directly and tell you again, thank you for helping give my life back so I can spend the rest of my life at my home here and with my people, all of my people, so that I can have a decent ending to my life. It would be a wonderful gift. Of course, this is a wonderful gift, but that would even be more. And I'm hoping that we can make it happen. I've been exonerated numerous times over the years. The government saying there's no evidence against me. Made up false evidence and everything. I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about. If not, please educate your young so that you know why so many people stood behind me. And let's try to stop this from happening. For years, they tried to hide what they did to us and keep it from the public from learning about it. We wanted to learn. Our word was we wanted to expose them so they wouldn't be able to do it again. Well, they're doing it again. Look what they're doing in Palestine. Look what they're doing in Ukraine. Look, now they're trying to Iran. They're killing thousands and thousands of babies and young children and destroying homes. And this is the same thing they did to us. This is why we got a day of mourning. And so we got the fight to expose these atrocities is not over. It's not over for us, or it's not over for the rest of the world, because once they get done with Iran and Palestine and Ukraine, they're going to move to another area. They're going to try to destroy another world, take over another world, because they want to be the Aarons of the world. They want to be the super race. They want to control the whole world, and we can't let them do that. We won't let them do that. And so I hope I can be there, which is next year. I hope it happens. Can make it happen. So we're not giving up, and the fight's not over. And this just says it's not over for us, all of us. So thank you very much again, and please forgive me for not being able to be there with you. It really, from my heart, it hurts, but it's not my doing. So. Doksha. And in the spirit of Crazy Horse, Leonard Peltier.
You're listening to This Week in Palestine on WZBC Radio, 90.3 FM. I'm your host this week, Sophia Rose Woolman. And today we are hearing from the National Day of Mourning, the 55th National Day of Mourning, which took place in Plymouth, Massachusetts this past Thursday, November 27th, 2025. The program was primarily emceed by Jean-Luc Pierrit, of the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana. He is also president of the board of the North American Indian Center of Boston. We heard from words from Melissa Harding Ferretti, who is the chairwoman of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. We also heard a speech by Keisha James, who is an enrolled member of the Aquinnah Wampanoag tribe. She's co-leader of the United American Indians in New England and a member of the North American Indian Centers of Boston Board of Directors. She's also a Harvard law student. Then we heard a speech by Matoi Monroe, who is co-leader of the United American Indians of New England. And then just now, we listened to a recording by Leonard Peltier, who addressed the National Day of Mourning, speaking to the crowd from his home on the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Reservation in Belcourt, North Dakota. Leonard Peltier, of course, the political prisoner who was finally released after being wrongfully convicted and incarcerated for 49 years, finally pardoned by President Obama in the final days of his presidency earlier this year. Let's turn back now to some more of the National Day of Mourning. All of the speakers each year at this program in its 55th year, all of the speakers are Indigenous people from different parts of this continent and around the world.
So at this time, we're going to have two more speakers up here on Coles Hill, and then we'll be getting ready to line up for our march. So our next speaker from the Council of Maya Elders, Juan Gonzalez.
What we see from a little far away from this land, the day has come to this country, to these people. You are facing a big crisis. If you don't organize and fight together, your American dream is going to die. It's dying. You see it. We see it. Everyone is watching. It's going to take more than this. And I say this because back home, we stopped the country for 2-3 months and nothing changes. Why? Because they have the power, they have the army, and they have the support of beautiful United States. Okay? So what our people did before, now it is our turn to do it, to fight for our people, for our countries, for our culture, for our children, for the future. You may don't see it here. Back home, you travel and you find our villages, you find our pyramids, thousands of pyramids, not just one or two as you watch it on the news or magazines. We have thousands Maya cities. And that's what we are fighting. We've been fighting, giving our lives, because these people are coming and destroying all of that. They want to take over everything. They don't have a soul. They don't have feelings. It's just the difference between them and us. They probably are less than us in terms of numbers. For some reason, they've been able to organize better than us. As you can see, they get away with everything. They are getting away with everything. So the words from the Council of Maya Elders is, okay, kids, Now it's your turn in history. Now it's in your hands to write your history. See what your children and the future generations, they're going to read about your generation, about your time in history. We try our best, and we're going to keep trying every day until the last day. But now it's your turn. So think about it. Go deep in your heart. Look at your roots, where your people came from, Here in this country, it's so easy. Oh, we are Americans, we're Americans. But they only label African American, Mexican American, Chinese American. How come they don't label them German America, Polish American? They don't have labels for them. So everyone looks American. And you know what? It is also terrible what we got to see our own people supporting Trump. And why? We start looking and talking to people. Because, when you come from other country and you're in the United States, you want to become a part of that. And you kind of put aside your roots, and then you are forced not only to speak the language, but, to behave the American way. And it's terrible. It's terrible. That's why we have all kinds of, not just people from this continent, from other countries that came here and are here that support this guy, Trump. So that's a big concern for us because they, our own people, are helping to destroy us. And we don't want that. We want them to come back to the roots, We don't want to, we welcome them, We all make mistakes, Maybe now they realize, oh, this guy is bad, it's not good news. So we are expecting and we hope that our own people come back to the roots. So we are strong, we're stronger, and we keep fighting, So please, these are just simple words from my elders. It's your turn to fight. Don't forget that. Please fight. And the funny thing is, it's not just for this piece of land that you call today United States, but this little place goes other places to destroy. So this is a very dangerous time. So if Hitler couldn't do it, if Mussolini couldn't do it, if Pinochet couldn't do it, if all those dictators that we have had couldn't do it, who knows? This guy, Trump, may be able to do it, fulfill that dream, So we have to stop them. We have to stop them together, We have to connect, network with our people, the Maya, down south with the Amazon. We just have to connect, We have to connect and do it. So please don't forget. And thank you very much. Malteo Shahao.
2 years ago, we invited very special speakers to this stage because we wanted everybody here to know that we reaffirm that the Palestinians are indigenous peoples too. And I'm very happy to have not just these past 2 years, but for many years before that, we have worked together with our Palestinian kin to shed light on the ongoing genocide in Gaza and Palestine. So it's with that I call up from the Palestinian Youth Movement, Leah Kayali.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Kayali. I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement. And just to describe myself, I'm wearing a red keffiyeh. I'm wearing black, a shirt that says the Palestinian Youth Movement with the map of Palestine on it. I'm wearing a tatriz headband, and I have very messy curly hair. On this day of mourning, it always forces me to reflect, especially in these last 2 years, on grief, loss, and survival. As Kelly Hayes, a Menominee writer and organizer, explains, mourning is the process of being undone by loss and remade in its wake. When we let our bodies grieve, we're metabolizing violence and death. Mourning is supposed to be retrospective. We mourn something that happened in the past, the death of a loved one, the theft of a home, the life we once had. But colonialism robs us of mourning itself in this sense because it rips us as Indigenous people from our roots and supplants an ongoing structure of violence. A genocide factory that breaks our bones, steals our land, and criminalizes our existence. It is this ceaselessness of violence that forces us to count the mounting bodies rather than visit the old graves. And even now, in this so-called ceasefire in Gaza, the colonial violence factory never rests. The Zionists continue to use aid as a weapon in a feeble attempt to force our people into capitulation. And when that doesn't work, they continue on to murder. Over 300 Palestinians have been murdered by Zionism since Trump's so-called peace plan went into effect. Shame. When I look to the contents of this colonial quote-unquote peace, what I see are attempts of forced surrender that will not work. Blood-soaked rice strewn on the street, bones protruding from a child's shriveled stomach, scalding water disfiguring the flesh of prisoners. Colonialism has imposed death on the daily stuff of life. A bag of flour, a tea kettle, a stomach ache are forever transformed. We are undone and remade in a perpetuum mobile. This genocide has forced me to reorient to the very concept of mourning. It forces humility like a sucker punch, and it makes me bend in the face of mortality. At my darkest times in the last 2 years, the death was so oppressive, so omnipotent, it felt like everyone was going to die and everything was going to be lost. But the fragility of life is the tender underbelly of the lion of resistance. Because we as Indigenous peoples have something that our enemies will never have, and that's a cause worth dying for. When we mourn publicly during colonial onslaught as we do today, we force the world to bear witness to the glorious lives that our people lived. We honor the martyrs even and especially when those in power want to erase them from the pages of history. We see this in the war on children waged both against Native kids and Palestinian ones. We mourn the unmarked graves that thousands of Native children abused and killed in boarding school were laid to rest at, and we also mourn the thousands of Palestinian children buried under rubble. But when we mourn, we remember their names, the tenor of their lives, the space left in the heart of their families. From Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old Palestinian girl whose last cry for help haunted the world, to John Parker, the Ojibwe boy who was stolen from White Earth Reservation, we will honor all our martyrs. We honor Crazy Horse and commit to fight in his legacy. We honor Anas al-Sharif and promise to speak truth to power. We honor Hannah Harris and Fatima Hassouna and vow to avenge every murdered and missing Indigenous and Palestinian woman and relative. In this way, by mourning, we say, bearing witness can never be enough. To honor our ancestors, you have to join the resistance. When I spoke here last year, I shared that to be Indigenous is to hold a sacred, even prophetic relation to our lands. And while that bond is unbreakable, the truth is that spirits can be broken. Our destiny is not written. And in many ways, apocalypse is already upon us. 95% of homes in Gaza have been destroyed. Entire bloodlines have been wiped out. And here on these lands, masked agents of the colonial state roam our streets, abducting our neighbors. Austerity and greed are draining the paychecks of working people to line the pockets of the world's first trillionaire. Friends and relatives, the capitalist Armageddon is upon us. And so we have to start fighting like we might lose our future. That's why I'm so honored to be held a space in this powerful gathering of Indigenous relatives, because we Palestinians are not the only ones to survive and resist the apocalypse of colonial genocide. Native people, from the Wampanoag of these lands to the Taino of the islands to the Tongva of the West Coast, have emerged from colonial genocide still resisting. To be amongst a people who know what it means to be steadfast and resist, no matter the cost and no matter the odds, it is a reminder to us all that we have a legacy to uphold. Whenever I fear, as a Palestinian, our cultural extinction, I remember how the Kanaka Maoli resisted the near elimination of their language, and in the span of a couple decades, raised an entire generation of native Hawaiian speakers. Or I remind myself of the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project that revitalized the ancestral language of this very land. There are thousands of examples of Indigenous resistance, from the battle for Wounded Knee to the Gilboa prison break to the release of Leonard Peltier. And it is such an honor to be sharing the stage with so many of my heroes today. For Keisha, Jean-Luc, Matoe Juan, and Leonard Peltier, I never thought this day would come. These examples of Indigenous resistance are proof that we can beat back this ceaseless colonial violence. It is proof that Indigenous victory will prevail against all odds. And living this legacy of resistance, it isn't easy or glamorous. And I know everybody here knows that. It's exhausting. I'm exhausted. We've been fighting with barely a moment to come up for air for 2 years. We as Palestinians have been carrying the mantle of resistance for a century. And my relatives here, many have been holding that torch of resistance against colonialism for half a millennia and more. But if we let that exhaustion overcome us, not only are we abandoning our legacy, but we're letting our oppressors distract us from the fact that we are actually winning. Monsters are biting when they're wounded. Empires are most brutal when they are gasping for air. And as our comrades in the Red Nation say, for our earth to live, capitalism and colonialism must die. And they are dying. As of last month, Israel has invested $145 million in an AI propaganda machine. Does that sound like an empire that is popular and successful? Donald Trump's fascist coalition is falling apart at the seams as the powerful elites try to outrace each other out of the Epstein files. Yes, my comrades and relatives, the empire is collapsing under its own weight. The gluttony of colonialism will be its downfall. But it is up to us to strike the final blow in the cracking facade of this violence factory. It is your obligation. Never let anyone tell you that our resistance does not matter. It is your power and our only hope. To be Indigenous is to be held a space in a shared struggle if we promise to commit to it. Promise to join an organization. Promise to campaign to evict war profiteers from our land, to call out complicit politicians, to build communal institutions, and to foster collective resistance. We can never let our oppressors set the confines of our struggle. They cannot make us small. When they want to put us on the defense, in moments of acute violence, in moments like these, we demand more, not less. Land back is the demand, and we cannot back down. Collective liberation is the horizon, and we march until we reach it. We are undone and remade in mourning, in an upward spiral towards the sun of freedom reaches all of us across all of these lands. On this day of mourning, we say to our martyrs and our ancestors, rest. We will continue the struggle. And so I want to close with a chant in Arabic, if you'll allow me. It means, "O martyrs, rest, rest. We will continue the struggle." يا شهيد ارتاح ارتاح احنا نواصل الكفاح يا شهيد ارتاح ارتاح احنا نواصل الكفاح. Free Palestine, land back. Thank you, everyone.
And I want folks to look from one end of Coles Hill to the other. I want you to know that today thousands of people have descended upon Coles Hill for this action.
You're listening to This Week in Palestine on WZBC 90.3 FM. On today's show, we have been hearing from the National Day of Mourning, which took place on Thursday, November 27, 2025 in Plymouth, Massachusetts for the 55th year. Our most recent speakers were Juan Gonzalez from the Council of Maya Elders and Leah Kayali of the Palestinian Youth Movement. Earlier in the hour, we heard Jean-Luc Perit, Chairwoman Melissa Harding Ferretti, who was Chairwoman of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. We heard from Keisha James, from Matoe Monroe, and we heard a recording that was shared at the National Day of Mourning from Leonard Peltier addressing the crowd from his home on the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Reservation in Belcourt, North Dakota. That brings us to the close of today's episode of This Week in Palestine. As always, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep asking the questions that unsettle power, challenge silence, and illuminate the paths to justice and peace. I'm your host this week, Sophia Rose Woolman, and it's been a deep and humbling honor to share this space with you. A space where truths are spoken, where resistance is held with reverence, and where solidarity is not up for negotiation. If you have reflections, questions, or would like to support the work we do, or if you feel called to step into this work yourself as a future host, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us anytime at twippodcast@gmail.com. That's This Week in Palestine Podcasts. TWIP podcasts@gmail.com. To our listeners, thank you for your time, for your trust, for your curiosity, and for your willingness to walk this path with us. And thank you to the brilliant team, the committed team, whose vision and dedication keep this platform alive. Bob Funk, Stanley Robinson, Stephen Lowe, Tahani Abu Mosa, Dr. Rana Awad, Dr. Bethany Marks, Professor Yara Rashid, Juliette Salama Olivier, Renaud Agoul, and our editor, Mohammed Al-Ghul. Each of these people's spirit and labor and commitment are the heartbeat of this show. You remind us that storytelling is not just a craft, it is a form of resistance, a form of care, and a form of collective memory. Until next time, keep walking toward truth. Keep walking toward Palestine. Keep walking in solidarity. This Week in Palestine is a production of Truth and Justice Radio, proudly broadcasting from WZBC Student Radio at Boston College. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. We'll be back next week, same time, same station. Until then, take care and stay steadfast. Peace.